This is my story of becoming addicted. So I grew up in a family of addiction to alcohol, and so primarily that's all I saw when I was growing up is people using alcohol and to extreme. So my parents were alcoholics, and most of my relatives were alcoholics, and alcohol was just the most normal thing that I saw in my home. And I recognized when I was young that it seemed to cause problems, and I thought that when I was quite young, I thought, oh, I would never drink because it seemed to cause pretty serious problems in my family. But I think the first time that I ever took a drink, I noticed something really quickly, and that was that I felt a sense of relief. And I think, given what I was growing up with and how I felt about myself, and I think that's really key as to why I ended up becoming addicted, is how I felt about myself. And I think it's really key about addiction and why people actually become addicted. I didn't feel very good about myself for most of my life, and certainly prior to my drinking, I didn't feel good. I felt really not good about me growing up. I didn't feel like I was wanted in my family, and I didn't feel like that I belonged in my family. I felt like there was something wrong with me. I did feel like my family didn't want me, and I certainly got messages like that that said I wasn't wanted, and I felt like I didn't fit in. And when I went out into the world, um, I felt like no one else would have ever accepted me either. If my own family wouldn't, if my own mother didn't want me, how could anybody else ever want me? And it really had an impact on me. And so I had very little self-esteem and very little confidence. And of course, I couldn't really manage very well in the world as a young person with such little confidence and with so little self-esteem. And I didn't do well as a result. I was isolated. I was lonely. I was alone. I was ashamed. I was embarrassed because of the position that I was in. And so I really, really stayed alone. I stayed isolated. I, I stopped at some point. I might have tried at some point to enter into social groups. I don't even remember that. I just remember for the most part that I stopped, or I didn't try to enter into social groups. I stayed by myself. And so a lot of my young years, I remember just standing against a wall. It's like I found a place to stand and or sit, whatever. And I just went there and I just held that position and tried to hold myself without falling apart. You sort of stiff and turn myself to stone. I think there were times I was trying to turn myself into a statue or become invisible or something, just to try and hide, so that I wouldn't feel so ashamed and so embarrassed about being so isolated and alone and so disliked and so set apart. Because it was very painful. It was very painful to feel like that nobody would like you, or that you couldn't make any friends, or in some way you were defective, or that nobody would ever want to be around you, or you were so terribly defective, or you were a loser or something. And those were all things that I felt about myself, and it was just a horrible feeling. It was easier to be alone than it was to have to look into anyone's face and see that recognition that I was a loser, or that I was not somebody that anybody would want to be around. It was very, very painful as a child, extremely painful. So I often preferred to be alone. That was easier for me to manage. I mean, I still felt painful inside, but alone was easier. At least I didn't have to see people's rejection in their faces. If I was alone, it was still painful, but it wasn't as painful as seeing the rejection. And so when I first tried alcohol for the first time, there was a sense of relief. It was like you're constantly walking around with this tight, horrible feeling inside of you, and then you drink, and it seems like it's like a sigh of relief, and that's what I felt. And that was the attraction, of course, because when you're constantly feeling this tightness and this difficult feeling inside of you, and then you drink alcohol, and suddenly there's this relief. You feel like, oh wow, that's like, wow, that's helpful, because it's hard to feel like this all the time, right? And so that was the attraction. Obviously, there was this sense of relief, and so very quickly when I was younger, like I quickly was out of control with alcohol. I couldn't stop when I started drinking. So very quickly, when I had a drink, if there was enough alcohol around I had access to, I would drink until I was drunk. That was so fast. Like by the time I was 16, I would drink until I was drunk, if I had enough alcohol around me. And so it was clear to me, like it was like I was alcoholic really young. I would say I was alcoholic at 16. I had that out of control drinking problem, and that was really problematic fast. And I knew it, and I didn't know what to do about it, because like I liked to drink, but I knew I couldn't stop when I started, and that was problematic. And then I found drugs, and drugs seemed to be helpful to me, because the first drug I tried, of course, was marijuana. And marijuana seemed to allow me to actually control my drinking a little bit. So if I smoked marijuana, I could actually stop drinking before I got totally inebriated, which was helpful. And so that seemed to offer some control. And that just started long, years of trying different drugs. And I was very drug curious. And there was part of me that, once I knew that I could take things that would change the way I felt, just wanted to take lots of different things. And I was just terribly curious and really wanted to try stuff. And I had met a boyfriend. He was the one that introduced me to drugs, and he wasn't as drug curious as I was. He was more conservative. He liked drinking a bit more. He didn't mind the pot. He liked pot, but I wanted to try everything. I wanted to take any other chemical drug I could get my hands on as well. I remember doing the first chemical drugs I did. I thought, oh my God, this is the way I want to feel all of my life. And I could only tell you it's about what I didn't want to feel anymore. And I felt so much of my life, this terrible painful existence. And I just wanted to get away from it. I just didn't want to feel anymore. And I tell you that's really what addiction is about, as far as I'm concerned. It's about not wanting to feel what you feel, just not wanting to experience what you're experiencing anymore. And it's really about people who have really been in places where it's been really, really painful. They've gone through a lot of painful stuff in their lives. And you know what? It doesn't mean you don't continue to go through really bad things, because I did. I continue to find myself in bad places and bad experiences. My family life continued to be repeated. I continued to find myself in situations that repeated exactly what I experienced in my family home. I entered into a workplace that was actually a mirror of what I grew up with. More dysfunctional people, more abuse, more emotional abuse. It just repeated itself over and over. It's like you cannot escape it. It's like you just keep picking all the wrong places to be, all the wrong people to be around, all the wrong stuff, and it repeats itself over and over, and it gets worse. You get to be witness to more violence, more abuse, more situations that you shouldn't be in. So you accumulate more trauma in your life that you don't need to be witness to or to be part of. I worked in a bank where you think you're not going to see much of that there. It was horrendous. The people there were so abusive, and they were abusive to the staff that worked there. And there was things going on there that it was appalling. There was so much drinking going on in that bank. The manager was seriously alcoholic. And I'd been there 2 different times. And the first time I left, because the manager was so abusive that it was hard to tolerate. And he would be calling staff members up at 2 a.m. and just swearing and cursing at them. And he would be playing some game in the lunchroom with a waiter from one of the bars. And I mean, it was just unbelievable. And I left then to go back to school. He was embezzling money from the bank, and, terrible things happened. And then I came back to that job, and then, another manager took over at some point, and this guy was so ill, and he was an alcoholic. And then the assistant manager, she was not well either. She was vicious to the employees, and she was just like going through them one at a time, like just abusing them till they would break. And then she'd move on to the next one and the next one. And then we had an assistant accountant who was, she was angry. I mean, they were all competing with each other, and she would take her anger out at people. And it was just like an environment of abuse, and here we are. And, half the employees are drinking uncontrollably, including myself. I was alcoholically drinking there. There were people doing amphetamines. It was intolerably horrible. I was smoking drugs every day while I was there. It was horrendous, the environment. I can't even begin to describe it. I remember going to work so drunk I couldn't even work that day. I was sleeping in the vault. I mean, I can't even begin to describe the situation that was. It's almost unrealistic. You can't imagine that could have gone on and nothing been done about it. But that's exactly what went on. I eventually left to get recovery. But I mean, I was sexually assaulted by my boss while everyone else ran out of the office. I mean, things that you couldn't imagine could happen, happened. And it was a government bank. It was provincial government, for God's sake. And they didn't want to admit there was anything going on. I mean, these things happen. And it's hard to imagine that alcoholism could actually exist in a workplace and look ever much as dysfunctional as a family. And this place looked like it. And they did not want to admit it was going on. It was horrendous. And yet there it was, as sick as any family could be. It existed there. And there I was in the midst of it all. So, I mean, I left my family after, I was 19 when my family fell apart. And I had already entered into this environment. And so I spent another, 13 years there in another very sick alcoholic environment. So another very unhealthy place. And I couldn't see my way out of it because I was so sick with my own alcoholism and addiction by that point that I didn't see how I could escape it. And the only way I got out was going into recovery. That was the only way I could get out of it. And I feared going into recovery because I didn't know what that even looked like. And was that something that would even help me at that point? So, the addiction and everything that it did to me, my marriage, I shouldn't have been in that marriage. I mean, it was unhealthy and you can't see it because you're caught in your addiction. You can't see a way out of that. I should never have married this man. I didn't know how to be in a relationship. I couldn't be healthy in a relationship. I didn't know anything about how to be in any relationship. I'd come out of a family that was so sick, I had no clue. The man I married shouldn't have been in a relationship with me. And, so this was terrible. We were together 17 years. 17 years, we should have figured it out and parted ways. And we didn't. So how long did we need to be together, destroying ourselves, not making a life that was better for either of us? When I left to go into treatment, I left him and hoping that he would find a better life. And he did. It was terrible because we did nothing for each other. I could not offer anyone anything because emotionally, I had nothing to offer. I didn't understand feeling. I didn't know how to deal with feeling. I'd been trying to escape feeling throughout the whole time I was addicted because the feelings I had prior to that were horrific. And I didn't know how to even think of how I would deal with any of that. I had not processed anything from growing up in an addicted home. It had done a ton of damage to me. And there was no way I knew what to do with that. I had no understanding of how you process things or how you sort things out. It was horrendous. So there was no way in the world I knew how to deal with that. And how was I going to deal with that? I had no understanding. And when you're in addiction, you're so caught, and you don't realize for the longest time that you are in fact addicted. I thought it many times I could probably make a decision to stop, but I just didn't want to. I didn't want to stop because nothing in my life seemed any better. I hated the job that I was doing. I certainly never wanted to work in a bank. That was not a place I wanted to be. It didn't, appeal to me at all. I got that job when my mother was ill at the very end of her life. And I took it because we needed money. I needed to get a job. It was not something that I really wanted, but I had to get a job. And then I couldn't figure out how to get out of that job and into something other than that. And try as I may, I couldn't find another job. But I mean, I was so ill at the time that I don't see that there would be any way I could have found my way out of there. I was half-heartedly taking courses at university, and I was getting decent marks, but I was no way or shape able to make a decision about where it was going or who I was even, who I was even. I mean, my husband and I had two totally different outlooks on life, not even similar. One of the best things I did at the time was I made sure that I wasn't going to have any children because I was in no way equipped to parent anyone. And I didn't want to repeat mistakes that were made with me. And I sure as hell didn't want to damage a child. So I'd made sure that I could not have children. I took care of that because I thought, no, I can't do that. That would be horrible. I would not make a good parent. I'd babysitted children at some point in my life as a young person, and saw at one point something in me that I thought, no, I can't be a parent because I think I would be a parent that wouldn't be very nice. And in my alcoholism, I thought, no, I can't do that. And, much later in life, when I was in recovery, I could see I could be a good parent, but not in the midst of my illness. I was so ill in my addiction, and I recognized it, that I knew that there was so much that needed to be done. I was in no shape to offer anyone anything. And I think when I was in treatment, I really realized that in a very short period of time, that I realized I was in no way in a position to be in a relationship, much less would I ever be in a position to be a parent. And that I just didn't have any tools. And it's the saddest part about, growing up in an addicted family. For one, I had no skills in those areas. And then when I went into my own addiction, I clearly became the person that could not be somebody in a healthy relationship, and B, definitely not someone that could parent a child. And I'm grateful. I'm grateful that I had the insight, and God only knows where I had that insight from, perhaps because of my own painful childhood. I had the insight to not become a parent, and that I made very definite decisions about that I would prevent myself from ever doing that. Just as I did as far as I chose never to get a license to drive a car. I chose that because there was so much suicidality in me that I thought, if I get a license to drive a car, I'm going to deliberately drive that car into oncoming traffic. I mean, I was so suicidal in my life, even in my addiction, that because in my addiction, I became very careless about my use. I thought, if I have a license to drive a car, I'm going to do something very, very dangerous with that, just to end my life. And I couldn't risk that I might take the lives of other people at the same time. And in my addiction, in that suicidality, I was willing to take any kind of drug or combination. And I did. I took lots of risks with my using, hoping that the risk would take me over the edge and I would not wake up or I would not come to. And amazingly enough, I kept waking up and surviving. The amounts of drugs or combinations that I used, I would survive and I would not die. And because so many times I wished when I went to bed at night, I wouldn't wake up in the morning. And so many times when I got up during the day, I hoped something would happen that would take me out during the day. When I worked at the bank, I often hoped somebody would come in with a gun to rob the bank. And I was going to say, go ahead, man, make my day. I was so fatalistic for so much of my using. I just wanted to die. I just didn't see a reason to be alive. It's a terrible way to live. And I mean, in some ways, I think that was good for me for when I entered recovery, because I entered realizing that the drugs weren't, and the alcohol had nothing left for me, because they could no longer hold the pain at bay. They could no longer actually numb out the way that I felt. I had reached a point in my life where the pain was no longer able to be numbed. Nothing was able to numb it out anymore. The drugs, they weren't working anymore. To want to die so badly every single day told me I needed to take some action. And that's what really motivated me to come into recovery. I reached a point where I said, okay, like it's like this. You either have to take your life actively, you need to make a decision to take it, or you need to make a decision to live. And if you plan on making a decision to live, then you need to go and get some help, because you can't keep going this way. It's not going to work. And so when I decided to actually reach out and maybe see if it was the addiction that was causing the problem, or at least whether getting the addiction under control or dealing with it might offer me a different opportunity, I said, if you do that, you have to give all of your effort in doing it. You can't be half-hearted at it, because if it doesn't work, you know what you're going to do. You're going to kill yourself. So this is the choice. You either make it wholeheartedly and you try with every effort you can to recover from this, or you kill yourself. So I said, okay, I'll make this attempt. I'll go and get some help. I'll see what will happen. I'll go and see if I can have the deal with my addiction, and then see what they have to offer me, like see what they say, the people that help treat addiction. And I'll do everything they say, and I'll work really, really hard, and I'll make a serious effort. I'll make a super serious effort. Whatever they ask me to do, I'll do. I'll give it 100%. And if it works, I'll stay. I'll make that 100% effort. And if it doesn't work, then I'll kill myself. And that was the decision I made. And I'll tell you, it wasn't easy, because I made the decision. I went to treatment, and I tell you, when things thawed out, it was painful. It was painful as hell. And I didn't think I was going to make it. Not at all. Because at first, when everything came out of my system, I was just angry, man. I was so angry. I was like angry. Like I was like so angry. I couldn't even, I couldn't say anything. I couldn't even respond to anybody. I couldn't, I was like, couldn't speak. Couldn't say a damn word. I was so angry. I was just so angry. I was like shut. The door was shut, and it was like that for a while. I didn't think I was going to break out of that, I went to the treatment, and well, first of all, I just sat there in the detox, and I was so angry, and they knew I was angry, they showed films, and I just made me angrier. And it kind of seemed like they were blaming my family. That just really angered me, because I couldn't manage that at the time. That part of it was my family. And then, And then I started to play basketball. Oddly enough, that's a weird thing to. I was never a basketball player. I was never played sports because no one would ever pick me for their team. But they had a basketball there, and I thought, okay, I got to do something because I'm losing my mind here. And so I took the basketball, and they had a basketball hoop outside the hospital, and I went out and I started just throwing hoops. Was never played basketball, but I just started, bouncing the ball and throwing hoops, bouncing the ball and throwing hoops, and it was very repetitive for me to do that. And it just gave me time to think. It allowed my head to calm down, the anger to calm down, worked off some of that angry edge, and cleared my mind a bit, so I could think. Because I was acting like a real pain in the butt on in the detox. I wasn't being very cooperative because I was just angry, and I wasn't like acting like a sensible person. And it's like I was mad at them. Why was I mad at them? It didn't make sense. And I was able to think it through, and I was able to realize that was I doing that? They were there to help me. Why was I angry at them? And then I started to think clear, and I finally came back in, and I asked them for help. I said, obviously, I don't know what I'm doing, and obviously I need some help. And, that showed a glimmer of sanity. And they sent me off to the treatment center, and it was hard. It still was hard. It was hard for me to know. I didn't know what I was supposed to do. I hadn't even a clue. I didn't know what caused the addiction. I know a lot now. Like, I can tell you a lot now because, I did my recovery. I know what it was, but I didn't know then. I hadn't even a clue. I wasn't even slightly. I didn't have a clue. I just didn't even know. And I began to find out what some of it was. And I remember them showing a film, The Heart of a Child. And it was my family. It was my family in that film. And it killed me. It killed me. And that killed me. Because it was my family. It was exactly my family. And I didn't understand how they had a film of it. I didn't understand how they had a film of my family. But how did anyone know that? How did they find it? How did they make a film like this? How did anyone know that stuff? I could see me in the film, my brother and my sister, my parents, and it killed me. And I couldn't even speak after. I was like, I was affected deeply. And I cried. Oh man, I cried and cried and cried. And that was the beginning. And it was a lot of years. It was a lot of years. It took a lot of years. That stuff doesn't. That journey doesn't happen quickly. It takes a long, long time to make that journey. And there was a lot of damage done. A lot of damage done by the drugs and the booze. Did a lot of damage to my brain. So what, a year and a half clean? I thought, oh my goodness, that's a pretty serious problem here, because I'm a lot more ill now than I was when I was using. And I was a lot more ill at a year and a half clean than I had been when I was using. And that was pretty scary. And it turned out that I had a mental health issue. And it was one that was in my family, and I might not have gotten it, but certainly the drugs probably ensured I was going to get it. So I had bipolar disorder, and that took a long, long, long time to fix. 17 years to be exact. It took 17 years to get the right medication. And I'll tell you what that meant. It meant for 17 years, I was suicidal. 17 years, I wanted to die every day. And I dealt with that by being very busy and going to meetings and doing everything I should do and helping other people. And became a counselor, and I loved the program recovery and what it was about. And I gave my life to that, to helping others. And that allowed me to survive until they found the right medication that allowed me to be alive and not want to be dead. And so I made it, I made it. And sometimes I wonder, how I made it through those 17 years, but I did. I made it through 17 years by being in recovery, being with people who are trying to get well, believing in the program, believing in helping others, and just believing that you can make a change in your life. And I did, made fantastically huge changes in my life, found the gift of recovery. And even though those 17 years were filled with those suicidal ideation, I found great joy in there as well. And I owe a lot to the recovering community. And I owe a lot to the 12-step community and to all it had to offer, and to many sources of support that I reached out to in order to survive. I would never have gone back and changed a thing in my decision to go down this path and seek recovery, because it's the greatest thing that I ever did. And it's not without sadness. You saw some tears because it's sad. Addiction is a very painful thing. And it carries with it its sadnesses, because there's things about that history I can't ever change. And so it's sad. Those things are still sad. I have great joy in my life today, but there's still things that are sad, that there was things I could do nothing about. My sister died 10 years ago of cancer, and that was sad. She died without knowing her own truth. That was sad. So there are sad things that you have to live with, and there's nothing you can do about. I was granted the joy of recovery, the ability to get well, and but addiction is serious. It's a very serious thing. Don't underestimate it, and freedom from it is extremely important. A lot of people think that harm reduction's the way to go, and I am so very grateful that I am free of my addiction. So very grateful that I didn't come into my recovery at another time and place, that I came into recovery when I did, because today I'm free of my addiction. And I'm so very grateful for that, because I would not want one bit of it tied to me today. There was nothing there for me. And I'm so grateful that it's gone. Thanks.